The pistol felt heavier than it should have as Deanna Langford placed it on the dresser, her fingers trembling despite the summer heat that made her simple black morning dress cling to her skin. She had fired it only once in her life, 3 weeks ago, standing over Thomas's body as the outlaws rode away with her horses and what little money they had saved. And she swore to God and anyone listening that she would never be that helpless again. Tulsa, Oklahoma in the summer of 1883 was a place where women like her, 24 years old and suddenly widowed, had few choices that did not involve remarrying quickly or heading back east to family who would treat her like a failure. Deanna had neither the inclination for the former nor the funds for the latter, so she stood in the small house Thomas had built with his own hands, staring at the land they had worked together for 2 years, and tried to figure out how a woman alone could run a horse ranch. The funeral had been 4 days ago. She had stood by the grave in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking their property, surrounded by neighbors who meant well but whose words felt like stones dropping into a well that had no bottom. They told her Thomas was in a better place, that God had a plan, that she was young and would find love again. She had wanted to scream at them that she did not want their platitudes, that Thomas had been ripped from her life by men with guns who valued horses more than human breath, that no plan could justify that kind of cruelty. Instead, she had knelt by the fresh earth after everyone left, placed her hand on the wooden marker that would stand until she could afford a proper headstone, and made a vow that felt like iron settling into her bones. "I will never love another man," she had whispered, her voice raw from crying. "I swear it on your grave, Thomas. My heart died with you, and I will not dishonor your memory by giving it away again." The words had felt right in that moment, a way to hold on to Thomas even as the reality of his absence threatened to swallow her whole. Now, standing in their bedroom, she wondered if grief had the right to make promises that the rest of her life would have to keep. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. Deanna wiped her eyes quickly, straightened her dress, and walked through the small house to answer it. On her porch stood Owen Bradford, the cowboy Thomas had hired 2 months before his death to help with the spring roundup. He was still here, which surprised her, since most men would have moved on after the ranch owner died and their pay became uncertain. Owen was perhaps 27 or 28, tall and lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle. His hat was in his hands, and his dark hair was clearly fresh washed, slicked back from a face that the sun had weathered but not yet hardened. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and they held an expression of genuine concern that made Diana's throat tighten. "Mrs. Langford," he said quietly, his voice carrying the soft drawl of someone who had grown up further south, maybe Texas or Louisiana. "I hope I am not disturbing you. I wanted to check on the mare in the east pasture. She looked like she might be favoring her left foreleg yesterday." Diana blinked, surprised by the mundane nature of his visit. She had expected condolences or worse, the speech about how she should sell the ranch and move to town. Instead, Owen was talking about horses as if the world had not ended 3 weeks ago. "I had not noticed," she admitted, feeling a flash of guilt. She had been so consumed by grief that she had barely managed to feed the animals, let alone check them for injuries. "Is it serious?" "Probably just a stone bruise, but I wanted to make sure before it got worse," Owen said. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I checked her this morning, soaked the hoof, wrapped it. She should be fine in a few days if she stays off it." "Thank you," Deanna said and meant it. "I should have been paying better attention." "You have had other things on your mind," Owen said simply, without the pity that usually accompanied such statements. "I will keep an eye on her." He started to turn away, and Diana found herself speaking before she had fully formed the thought. "Mr. Bradford, have you been paid?" Owen stopped, looked back at her. "No, madam, but I am not worried about it. I know things are complicated right now." "How long are you planning to stay?" The question hung between them, and Diana saw something flicker across Owen's face, an emotion she could not quite name. He put his hat back on, adjusted it carefully. "As long as you need help with the horses, Mrs. Langford. Your husband was a good man, and he was teaching me things about breeding that I could not learn anywhere else. I figure I owe him enough to make sure his ranch does not fall apart while you are getting your bearings." It was the most he had said to her in one stretch since Thomas died, and Diana felt something shift in her chest, not quite gratitude but close to it. "I cannot afford to pay you much right now. The outlaws took most of our cash, and I will not have money from horse sales until fall at the earliest." "I do not need much," Owen said. "Room in the bunkhouse, 3 meals a day, and whatever you can spare when the horses sell. That will do me fine." Diana studied him, trying to understand what kind of man would work for almost nothing on a ranch run by a grieving widow who barely knew one end of a horse from the other. Thomas had handled all the business, all the breeding decisions, all the contacts with buyers. She knew how to ride and how to care for the animals, but running the ranch was something else entirely. "Why are you really staying?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "You could find work anywhere. Why stay here?" Owen met her eyes steadily, and she saw no guile in his expression, just a quiet sincerity that reminded her painfully of Thomas. "Because your husband gave me a chance when I needed one, and because walking away from someone who needs help is not how I was raised. If that is not a good enough reason, I will pack my things, but I would rather stay and do what I can." Diana felt tears prick her eyes again, and she hated it, hated that she could not get through a single conversation without crying. "Stay," she said, her voice rough. "Please. I do not know how to do this alone." "You are not alone," Owen said quietly. Then he touched the brim of his hat, nodded to her, and walked back toward the barn, his long stride easy and unhurried. Diana watched him go, then closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She did not know what to make of Owen Bradford, but she was grateful for his presence in a way that felt almost like betrayal. Thomas had been gone less than a month, and already she was relying on another man. But what choice did she have? The ranch would not run itself, and Pride would not feed the horses or fix the fences or handle the 100 other tasks that Thomas had made look easy. The days that followed fell into a pattern that Diana clung to like a lifeline. She woke before dawn, dressed in her morning clothes, and walked out to find Owen already working. He never waited for her instructions, never made her feel incompetent. Instead, he simply did what needed doing and reported to her in the evening about what had been accomplished. He fixed the fence in the north pasture where the outlaws had broken through. He reshod 3 horses whose hooves had grown too long. He cleaned out the water troughs and repaired the roof on the equipment shed. He worked from sunup to sundown, ate the simple meals Diana prepared, and never once asked her for anything beyond what she had already offered. What struck Diana most was his silence. Owen did not try to fill the air with meaningless chatter or awkward condolences. He did not tell her that time would heal her wounds or that she should be grateful for the years she had with Thomas. He simply existed alongside her grief, a steady presence that demanded nothing. A week after their conversation on the porch, Diana walked out to the barn after breakfast to find Owen working with one of the young horses, a 2-year-old gelding that Thomas had been training before he died. The horse was skittish, dancing at the end of the lead rope, but Owen's voice was low and calm, a steady stream of words that Diana could not quite make out. She stopped in the doorway, watching as Owen approached the horse with infinite patience, one hand extended, giving the animal time to decide whether to trust him. It took nearly 10 minutes, but eventually the gelding lowered his head, sniffed Owen's palm, and allowed himself to be touched. Thomas said this one had potential, Deanna said, and Owen turned, not startled but aware. He was right, Owen said, running his hand down the horse's neck. Good bone structure, smart eyes. He will make someone a fine riding horse once he settles down. You think we can sell him in the fall? If that is what you want to do. Owen paused, then added carefully, your husband had thoughts about keeping him for breeding, said his bloodlines were some of the best in the territory. Deanna felt her chest tighten. Thomas had talked about that, about building a breeding program that would make their ranch known throughout Oklahoma and beyond. It had been his dream, the thing that lit up his face when he talked about the future. I do not know enough about breeding to make those decisions, she said, her voice flat. You could learn, Owen said. He was not pushing, just stating a fact. Thomas kept records, wrote down all his thoughts about which horses should be bred to which. I have been reading through them. His instincts were good. You have been reading his records. I hope that is all right, Owen said quickly. I wanted to understand what he was trying to build here. Seemed disrespectful not to. Deanna did not know what to say to that. She walked into the barn, into the dim coolness that smelled of hay and horses and leather. Thomas's record books were in the office, a small room off the main barn where he had spent hours poring over pedigrees and planning future breeding seasons. Show me, she said. Owen tied the gelding to a post and led Deanna to the office. The books were spread across the desk, Thomas's neat handwriting covering page after page. Owen had added his own notes in the margins, questions and observations that showed he had been thinking deeply about Thomas's plans. For the next hour, Owen walked Deanna through the breeding program Thomas had envisioned. He explained bloodlines and conformation, temperament and marketability. He showed her which mares were ready to breed and which stallions Thomas had thought would produce the best offspring. He spoke with enthusiasm but without pressure, laying out information and letting her draw her own conclusions. Deanna found herself leaning forward, actually interested despite her grief. This had been Thomas's passion, and seeing it through Owen's eyes made her feel closer to her husband, as if his dreams could still have life even though he was gone. You really think we could make this work? She asked when Owen finished. I think Thomas was building something special, Owen said. It would be a shame to let it die with him. The words were gentle, but they hit Deanna hard. She looked down at Thomas's handwriting, at the future he had planned that would never include him. I do not know if I am strong enough for this. You do not have to decide today, Owen said. We have time before breeding season. For now, we just keep the horses healthy and safe. The rest will come when it comes. Deanna looked up at him, at this man who was giving her space to grieve while quietly holding her husband's dreams intact. Why are you doing this? Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My father died when I was 16, left my mother with 5 children and a farm that was more debt than profit. I watched her struggle, watched neighbors who said they would help disappear as soon as it got hard. The only person who stuck around was an old cowboy named Jake who worked for almost nothing until we got back on our feet. He taught me that loyalty is not about what you say, it is about what you do when nobody is watching. Where is your mother now? Remarried, living in Louisiana. She is happy, which is all I wanted for her. Owen smiled slightly. Took her 6 years before she was ready, and Jake never once pushed her, just stayed and helped and let her heal in her own time. Deanna felt something crack inside her chest, a small fissure in the wall she had built around her heart. "I swore on Thomas's grave that I would never love again," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I cannot imagine feeling that way about anyone else." "Then do not," Owen said simply. "Nobody is asking you to." The relief that flooded through Deanna was so intense it made her dizzy. Owen was not trying to court her, was not waiting for her grief to pass so he could step into Thomas's place. He was just here helping, with no expectations beyond the work itself. "Thank you," she whispered. Owen nodded, gathered up the record books and handed them to her. "These are yours whenever you want to look at them. No rush." He left her alone in the office, surrounded by Thomas's plans and dreams, and for the first time since the funeral, Deanna felt something other than crushing grief. She felt a tiny spark of possibility, fragile as a candle flame but real nonetheless. The summer heat intensified as June gave way to July. Deanna continued to wear her mourning clothes despite the temperature, a visible reminder to everyone in Tulsa that she was not available, not interested, not ready. The widow Carson had already stopped by twice with her nephew in tow, a young man fresh from St. Louis who worked in a bank and had no interest in horses, but apparently wanted a wife with property. Deanna had sent them away politely but firmly, and the next time they came, Owen had happened to be standing on the porch, his presence enough to make them leave without even knocking. "You do not have to guard me," Deanna had said, though she was grateful. "I was not guarding you," Owen had replied. "I was fixing the porch railing. If that happened to discourage unwanted visitors, well, that is just fortunate timing." Deanna had almost smiled, which felt like a betrayal and a relief at the same time. The work on the ranch continued. Owen taught Deanna how to check the horses for injuries, how to recognize signs of colic or infection, how to trim hooves and apply liniment. He was patient with her questions, never condescending, always explaining things as if her learning mattered. Slowly, Deanna began to feel less like a helpless widow and more like someone who might actually be able to run a horse ranch. They fell into an easy rhythm of working side by side. Owen would start a task, and Deanna would join him, learning by doing. They repaired fences together, mucked out stalls together, moved horses from one pasture to another. The work was hard and hot and endless, but it gave Deanna purpose beyond grief. What surprised her most was that Owen never tried to take over. He could have easily made all the decisions, run the ranch as if it were his own, and Deanna would have been too overwhelmed to stop him. But he did not. Instead, he presented options and waited for her input. He taught her how to evaluate the horses so she could make informed choices. He treated her like a partner, not a burden. One afternoon in mid-July, they were working together to train a young mare to accept a saddle. The mare was nervous, rolling her eyes and dancing away every time Owen approached with the saddle blanket. Deanna watched as he backed off, gave the horse space, then tried again with infinite patience. "Thomas used to say that horses are like people," Deanna said, speaking without thinking. "They need time to trust." "He was right," Owen said, his eyes never leaving the mare. "Cannot rush it. Have to let them come to you on their own terms." Deanna felt the weight of those words settle over her. She wondered if Owen was still talking about horses. The mare finally allowed the blanket to be placed on her back, and Owen rewarded her with gentle words and a soft touch. He moved slowly, deliberately, building trust one moment at a time. Watching him, Deanna felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight grip she had been keeping on her emotions. "I dream about him," she said suddenly. "About Thomas. I dream that the outlaws never came, that he is still alive, and then I wake up and have to remember all over again that he is gone." Owen turned to look at her, and his eyes held such compassion that Deanna had to look away. "I am sorry," he said quietly. That must be hard. It is like losing him twice, Deanna said, her voice breaking. Every single morning. Owen set down the saddle and walked over to where she was standing by the fence. He did not touch her, did not invade her space, but his presence was solid and grounding. There is no timeline for grief, he said. You loved him, and love does not just disappear because someone dies. Take all the time you need. What if I never stop needing time? Deanna asked, finally looking at him. What if this is just who I am now? Then that is who you are, Owen said. And that is all right too. Deanna felt tears streaming down her face, and she did not try to hide them. Owen pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, handed it to her, and then quietly went back to working with the mare, giving Deanna the space to cry without feeling watched. That night, after Owen had gone to the bunkhouse and Deanna was alone in the house she had shared with Thomas, she sat at the kitchen table and let herself think about the cowboy who had become essential to her life without her quite realizing it. He was kind, yes, but it was more than that. He was respectful of her grief in a way that nobody else had been. He did not try to fix her or rush her or convince her that life would get better. He simply existed alongside her pain, bearing witness without judgment. Deanna realized with a start that she looked forward to seeing Owen each morning. Not in a romantic way, she told herself firmly, but in the way you look forward to being around someone who makes life feel a little less overwhelming. He was becoming her friend, and she had not had a friend since Thomas died. The thought should have comforted her, but instead it filled her with guilt. Was she dishonoring Thomas by finding comfort in another man's presence? Was she breaking the vow she had made at his grave? She did not have answers, so she did what she had been doing every night since the funeral. She walked outside in the darkness, climbed the hill to the cemetery, and sat by Thomas's grave. I do not know what I am doing, she told the wooden marker. Owen is a good man, and he is helping me keep your dream alive. But I feel guilty every time I smile at something he says, every time I realize I have not thought about you for an hour or two. I swore I would never love anyone else, and I meant it. But I do not know how to live in this much pain forever. The night offered no answers, just the sound of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Deanna sat there until her tears dried, then walked back down the hill to the empty house, and the empty bed, and the empty future she could not quite envision. August brought a brief respite from the heat in the form of thunderstorms that rolled across the Oklahoma plains with dramatic intensity. Deanna stood on the porch one evening, watching lightning split the sky, and thought about how Thomas had loved these storms. He would have been out here with her, his arm around her waist, marveling at the raw power of nature. Owen came running from the barn, his hat pulled low against the rain. All the horses are secure, he called over the thunder. Brought the young ones into the barn so they do not spook. Thank you, Deanna said, and then on impulse added, stay on the porch until the worst passes. You will get soaked trying to make it to the bunkhouse. Owen hesitated, then climbed the steps and stood at the far end of the porch, respecting her space even in the midst of the storm. They watched in silence as rain pounded the earth and lightning illuminated the landscape in brilliant flashes. I love storms, Owen said after a while. They remind me that nature does not care about our plans. It just is what it is, powerful and wild and impossible to control. Thomas loved them too, Deanna said, and this time saying his name did not feel like swallowing glass. He said they made him feel alive. He sounds like he was a good man. He was the best man I have ever known, Deanna said fiercely. Then, more quietly, I do not know how to stop missing him. Maybe you are not supposed to stop, Owen said. Maybe you just learn how to carry the missing with you while still living your life. Deanna turned to look at him through the rain-dimmed light. "Is that what your mother did?" "Eventually," Owen said. "But it took time and it looked different than she thought it would. She thought she would never be happy again, that grief would define the rest of her life. But slowly, day by day, she found moments of joy. And then the moments became hours, and the hours became days, and one day she realized she was actually living again, not just surviving. Did she feel guilty about it?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said. "She felt like being happy meant she had forgotten my father, or that his death did not matter. But Jake helped her understand that loving my father and living her own life were not mutually exclusive. My father would have wanted her to be happy, not to bury herself in grief." "I do not think I can love anyone else," Deanna said, the words coming from the deepest part of her soul. "My heart feels broken in a way that cannot be fixed." "Then do not love anyone else," Owen said, his voice gentle. "There is no rule that says you have to. But do not let grief keep you from living, Deanna. You are too young and too strong to just give up on life." It was the first time he had used her first name, and the intimacy of it should have felt wrong but instead felt right, like a key turning in a lock. Deanna did not correct him, did not retreat behind the formality of Mrs. Langford. Instead, she let the moment stand, a small shift in the space between them. The storm passed, leaving the air clean and cool. Owen tipped his hat to her and headed to the bunkhouse, splashing through puddles, and Deanna went inside to the house that felt a little less empty than it had before. The weeks that followed were marked by small changes that Deanna barely noticed until they had accumulated into something significant. She stopped dreading the mornings and started looking forward to the work. She began to smile at Owen's dry observations about the horses. She caught herself humming while she cooked, something she had not done since Thomas died. The guilt was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also curiosity about what Owen would teach her each day, satisfaction in learning new skills, pride in the way the ranch was thriving under their combined care. One morning in late August, a man rode up to the ranch on a fine black stallion. He introduced himself as Marcus Chen, a horse buyer from Kansas City who had done business with Thomas in the past. Deanna invited him in, offered him coffee, and listened as he explained that he was looking to purchase several horses for a breeding program. "Your husband had an excellent eye for bloodlines," Marcus said. "I was sorry to hear about his passing. He was an honest man in a business that does not always value honesty." "Thank you," Deanna said. "Would you like to see what we have available?" She led Marcus out to the pastures, and Owen joined them, his presence steady and reassuring. Together, they showed Marcus the horses that were ready for sale, and Deanna found herself drawing on everything Owen had taught her about evaluating conformation and temperament. She spoke with confidence about bloodlines and training, and she saw Marcus's expression shift from polite interest to genuine respect. "You have learned well," Marcus said when they finished the tour. "I would like to purchase 3 of your horses if the price is right." Deanna named a figure that Owen had helped her calculate, fair but firm. Marcus countered with a lower offer, and Deanna held her ground, explaining why the horses were worth what she was asking. In the end, they settled on a price that was more than Deanna had dared to hope for, enough to pay Owen properly and have money left over for supplies and improvements. After Marcus left with the horses, a bank draft in Deanna's hands, she turned to Owen with tears in her eyes. "We did it," she said, her voice shaking. "We actually sold them for a good price." "You did it," Owen corrected gently. "You made that sale, Deanna. I was just standing there looking pretty." Deanna laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, and it felt like the first time she had truly laughed since Thomas died. Owen grinned at her, and the joy on his face was so genuine that Deanna felt her heart squeeze. "Thank you," she said, suddenly serious. "For everything. For staying, for teaching me, for not giving up on this place when you had every reason to leave. I could not have done any of this without you." "You are stronger than you think," Owen said. "You just needed time to find your feet again." That night, Deanna went to Thomas's grave as she did every night, but this time her words were different. "I sold 3 horses today," she told the wooden marker. "For a good price. Your breeding program is working, Thomas. Your dreams are still alive. And I am learning how to do this, how to run the ranch you built. I hope you would be proud of me." She paused, listening to the wind rustle through the grass. "Owen has been helping me. He is a good man, kind and patient and respectful. I want you to know that he is not trying to replace you. Nobody could ever replace you. But he is helping me survive, and I think you would have liked him. I think you would have been grateful that he stayed when everyone else left." Deanna sat there for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. For the first time since the funeral, she felt a sense of peace, fragile but real. September brought cooler temperatures and the promise of fall. The ranch was thriving, the horses healthy and well-trained. Deanna had paid Owen his back wages and given him a bonus from the sale, but he had asked her to put most of it toward improvements on the ranch. Together, they had repaired the bunkhouse roof and built a new training pen. Deanna found herself watching Owen more than she should. She noticed the way he moved with quiet efficiency, the way his hands were gentle with the horses, the way his rare smiles transformed his entire face. She told herself it was just appreciation, just friendship, nothing more. But late at night, alone in her bed, she could not quite convince herself that was true. She still wore her mourning clothes, still visited Thomas's grave every evening, still swore that her heart was buried with her husband. But something was changing inside her, something she was afraid to name. One afternoon, they were working together to move a group of horses to a new pasture. One of the mares was being difficult, refusing to go through the gate, and Deanna was getting frustrated. Owen came up beside her, his presence calm and steady. "She is scared," he said quietly. "See how her ears are back. Something about that gate is worrying her. We have to show her there is nothing to fear." He walked through the gate himself, stood on the other side, and called to the mare with soft words. Deanna watched as the horse's ears came forward as she took one tentative step, then another, until she was through the gate and nuzzling Owen's hand. "How did you do that?" Deanna asked, genuinely amazed. "I did not do anything," Owen said. "I just gave her time to decide for herself. Pushing would have made her dig in her heels. Patience lets her come to her own conclusion." Deanna looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something crack wide open inside her chest. Owen had been giving her the same gift he had given the mare. Time and space to make her own decisions, patience without pressure, a steady presence that asked for nothing in return. "Owen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at her, and something in her expression made him go very still. "Deanna, I need to tell you something," she said, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "I swore on Thomas's grave that I would never love again. I meant it with everything in me. I thought my heart had died with him." Owen did not move, did not speak, just waited with that infinite patience that had become so familiar. "But you," Deanna continued, the words spilling out now, unstoppable. "You have been here every day, helping me, teaching me, never asking for anything, never pushing me to be anything other than what I am. You have held Thomas's dreams as carefully as if they were your own. You have given me space to grieve while quietly showing me that life can still have purpose and meaning. And I have been fighting it, fighting you, fighting myself, because I thought loving anyone else would be a betrayal." She took a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. "But I do not think Thomas would want me to spend the rest of my life alone. I think he would want me to be happy. And you make me happy, Owen. You make me want to wake up in the morning. You make me laugh. You make me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could have a future that is not just endless grief." Owen's eyes were bright with emotion, but he still did not move toward her. "What are you saying, Deanna?" "I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you," Deanna said, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "And I do not know what to do about it because I swore I never would, and I do not want to dishonor Thomas's memory, but I cannot keep denying what I feel." Owen was quiet for a long moment, and Deanna felt panic rising in her chest. She had misread everything, had mistaken kindness for something more, had ruined the one good thing in her life by wanting too much. Then Owen said, very gently, "I have been in love with you since the day I met you." Diana's breath caught. "What?" "When Thomas first hired me, you came out to the barn to bring us lunch," Owen said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You were wearing a blue dress, and you had flour on your cheek from baking bread. You smiled at me and said you hoped I would like it here, that Thomas needed good help and you were glad he found it. And I looked at you and thought I had never seen anyone more beautiful in my entire life. But Thomas was your husband, and I respected that absolutely," Owen said firmly. "I never would have acted on what I felt, never would have done anything to disrespect your marriage. You were happy with him, and that was enough for me. I was content to work for him, to learn from him, and to see you happy even if it could never be with me." Diana could barely breathe. "And when he died, I stayed because you needed help," Owen said. "But I also stayed because I could not bear to leave you. I knew you were grieving, knew you needed time, knew that pushing you toward anything before you were ready would be the worst thing I could do. So I waited. I helped. I gave you all the space you needed. And I told myself that even if you never loved me back, being here with you was better than being anywhere else without you." "You never said anything," Deanna whispered. "How could I?" Owen asked. "You were drowning in grief, Deanna. The last thing you needed was some cowboy declaring his feelings and making everything more complicated. You needed time to heal, time to find yourself again. You needed to know that I was here because I cared about you as a person, not because I was waiting for my chance to step into Thomas's place." "You could have been waiting forever," Deanna said. "I swore I would never love again." "I know," Owen said simply. "And if that was what you needed, then that was what I would have given you. I would rather spend my life helping you run this ranch as your friend than lose you by demanding more than you could give." Deanna felt something break loose inside her. All the grief and guilt and fear that had been holding her together suddenly releasing its grip. She walked toward Owen, closing the distance between them, and looked up into his eyes. "I do love you," she said, the words coming easier now. "I love your patience and your kindness and the way you honor Thomas's memory by caring for his dreams. I love that you never pushed me, never tried to rush me, never made me feel guilty for taking my time. I love that you see me as strong even when I feel weak. I love you, Owen Bradford, and I am terrified of what that means." Owen reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, and Diana felt herself leaning into it. "It means we take it one day at a time," he said softly. "It means we honor what you had with Thomas while building something new together. It means you do not have to carry your grief alone anymore. It means I get to love you the way you deserve to be loved if you will let me." "I do not know how," Deanna admitted. I do not know how to love someone new when I still love someone who is gone. Love is not a finite resource, Owen said. You can love Thomas and love me too. One does not cancel out the other. Your heart is big enough for both. Diana thought about that, about the possibility that grief and love could coexist, that moving forward did not mean leaving Thomas behind. I want to try, she said. I want to try to be happy again, with you. Owen smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. That is all I have ever wanted. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. Diana kissed him back, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence, and felt something inside her that had been frozen for months finally begin to thaw. When they pulled apart, Diana was crying again, but this time the tears were not just from grief. There was joy mixed in, fragile and new but undeniably real. I need to visit Thomas's grave, she said. I need to tell him. Owen nodded, understanding without explanation. Do you want me to come with you? Diana thought about it, then shook her head. Not this time. This is something I need to do alone. But wait for me. When I come back, I will be here, Owen said. I will always be here. Diana walked up the hill to the cemetery as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She sat by Thomas's grave, placed her hand on the wooden marker and took a deep breath. I broke my vow, she said quietly. I swore I would never love again, and I meant it. But Owen, he just kept being there, kept helping, kept showing me that life could still be good. And I fell in love with him, Thomas. I did not mean to. I fought it as hard as I could, but it happened anyway. She wiped her eyes, looking at the marker that bore her husband's name. I hope you can forgive me. I hope you understand that loving Owen does not mean I love you any less. You will always be my first love, always be the man who taught me what it meant to be cherished. But you are gone, and I am still here, and I do not want to spend the rest of my life alone. The wind rustled through the grass, and Diana imagined she could hear Thomas's voice in it, gentle and kind, telling her to be happy. She sat there as the stars came out, talking to her husband about the man she was falling in love with, and for the first time since his death, she felt at peace with her choice. When she finally walked back down the hill, Owen was sitting on the porch, waiting. He stood when he saw her, and Diana walked straight into his arms, letting him hold her as she cried out the last of her guilt and fear. I am ready, she whispered against his chest. I am ready to try this with you. Owen held her tighter, and Diana felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, a rhythm that promised safety and love and a future she could finally begin to imagine. The next weeks were a dance of discovery and adjustment. Diana stopped wearing her mourning clothes, trading the heavy black fabric for the simple dresses she had worn before Thomas died. She still visited his grave regularly, but now it was to share her joys as well as her sorrows, to tell him about the ranch's successes, and Owen's kindness, and the slow rebuilding of her heart. Owen courted her with the same patience he had shown throughout their friendship. He brought her wildflowers from the pastures, cooked her dinner when she was exhausted from a long day's work, sat with her in the evenings and listened as she talked about Thomas or her dreams or her fears. He never tried to erase her past, never acted jealous of the love she still carried for her late husband. Instead, he honored it, understanding that her capacity to love deeply was part of what made her who she was. They worked together on the ranch, partners in every sense of the word. Diana continued to learn about breeding and training, and Owen taught her everything he knew, treating her as an equal. They made decisions together about which horses to sell and which to keep, which mares to breed and which stallions to use. The ranch thrived under their shared care, and word began to spread that the Langford Ranch was producing some of the finest horses in Oklahoma. One evening in October, as they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Owen reached over and took Deanna's hand. The gesture was simple, but it felt momentous, a physical acknowledgement of what was growing between them. "I love you," he said, not for the first time but with a weight that made Diana's breath catch. "I know we are taking this slow, and I am fine with that. But I want you to know that I am in this for the long haul. Whatever you need, however much time it takes, I am here." Diana squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength and gentleness combined. "I love you too," she said, and this time the words came without guilt, without fear, just simple truth. "I did not think I could feel this way again, but you have shown me that the heart is more resilient than I knew." "Your heart is extraordinary," Owen said. "It has been through so much, and it is still capable of so much love. That is not weakness, Deanna. That is incredible strength." Deanna leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of horses and hay and the soap he used, a smell that had become as familiar to her as her own. "Will you stay?" she asked, even though she knew the answer. "Not just for the ranch, but for me, for us." "I am not going anywhere," Owen said firmly. "This is where I belong, with you, with these horses, building a life that honors what Thomas started while making it our own." "He would have liked you," Deanna said softly. "Thomas would have appreciated how hard you work, how much you care about the horses. He would have trusted you with his dreams." "I hope so," Owen said, "because his dreams are your dreams and your dreams are everything to me." They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Oklahoma sky in brilliant reds and purples, and Diana felt something she had not felt since before Thomas died: hope for the future. Winter came to Tulsa with cold winds and occasional snow, and Deanna invited Owen to move into the main house rather than staying in the drafty bunkhouse. She gave him the spare room, maintaining propriety even as their relationship deepened, and they fell into a domestic routine that felt both new and comfortable. Owen cooked breakfast while Deanna fed the horses. They worked together during the day, then came inside to dinner that they prepared together, talking and laughing and planning for the spring breeding season. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, sometimes reading, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence of two people who were completely at ease with each other. Diana still had moments of grief, days when the absence of Thomas hit her like a physical blow. But now she had Owen to help her through those moments, holding her when she cried, listening when she needed to talk, giving her space when she needed to be alone. He never tried to fix her pain or tell her she should be over it by now. He simply bore witness to it, acknowledging that grief was a price paid for love and that there was no shame in it. Christmas came, the first since Thomas died, and Diana had been dreading it. But Owen made it bearable by acknowledging her pain while also creating new traditions. They went together to put flowers on Thomas's grave Christmas morning, and Deanna felt Owen's hand steady on her back as she cried. Then they came home and cooked a meal together, and Owen gave her a small gift, a leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover. "For recording your own observations about the horses," he explained. "Thomas left you his records, but you should have your own too. You have learned so much, Deanna, and your insights are valuable." Deanna held the journal to her chest, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means everything." She gave him a new saddle, one she had secretly commissioned from the leather worker in town, made to his exact specifications. Owen's eyes went wide when he saw it, and he ran his hands over the tooled leather with something like reverence. "Deanna, this is too much," he protested. "No, it is not," she said firmly. "You have given me everything that matters, your time, your patience, your love, your faith in me. A saddle is a small thing compared to that." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Deanna felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat, the warmth of his body against hers. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Deanna said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As winter gave way to spring, Owen asked Deanna to marry him. They were in the barn, working with the foals that had been born in March, when he suddenly went quiet. Deanna looked up from the foals she was examining to find him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. Owen took a deep breath, then knelt in the hay, pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, and looked up at her with eyes full of love and hope and barely contained nervousness. "Deanna Langford, I know this is complicated," he said. "I know you love Thomas, and I know a part of you always will. I'm not asking you to forget him or to stop loving him. I am just asking you to love me too. Marry me, Deanna. Let me be your partner in this life, in this ranch, in everything. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, every day for the rest of our lives." Deanna felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy this time, pure and uncomplicated. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, stood up, and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. The foal they had been working with nickered softly, as if in approval, and Deanna laughed against Owen's lips. "I need to tell Thomas," she said when they finally pulled apart. "I know," Owen said, smiling. "Go ahead. I will finish up here." Deanna walked up the hill to the cemetery, the ring catching the afternoon sunlight. She sat by Thomas's grave and placed her hand on the marker, which was now a proper headstone, granite carved with his name and the dates of his too short life. "I am getting married," she told him. "To Owen. I know I swore I never would. I know I promised my heart died with you, but I was wrong, Thomas. My heart is scarred and it carries you with it everywhere, but it is still beating, still capable of love. Owen makes me happy. He honors your memory by caring for our ranch and our dreams. And I think you would approve of him. I think you would want me to be happy." She sat there for a long time, feeling the Oklahoma wind on her face, and she swore she could feel Thomas's presence, not sad or angry but peaceful, giving her his blessing to move forward with her life. They were married in May of 1884, a year and a day after Thomas's death, in a simple ceremony in the Tulsa church. Deanna wore a pale blue dress, not white, an acknowledgement of her past even as she stepped into her future. Owen wore a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes shining with joy as Deanna walked down the aisle toward him. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Deanna with such tender passion that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. Deanna kissed him back, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude and hope she felt into that moment. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors and friends bringing food and music. Deanna danced with Owen in the yard, his arms around her, and felt a completeness she had thought she would never experience again. She was not betraying Thomas by loving Owen. She was honoring both of them, carrying her past with her while embracing her future. That night, as they lay together in the bed Deanna had once shared with Thomas, now transformed into something new, Owen held her close and whispered, "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for letting your heart love again. Thank you for being patient," Deanna whispered back. "Thank you for not pushing, for giving me time, for understanding that I needed to heal at my own pace. That is why I fell in love with you, Owen, not despite your patience but because of it." Owen kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I would have waited forever," he said. "You are worth every second." They made love with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, building intimacy one touch at a time. Deanna felt no guilt, no shame, just overwhelming love for the man who had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway, who had never demanded anything but had given everything. The years that followed were marked by hard work, deep love, and the slow building of a life together. The ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming known throughout Oklahoma and beyond for the quality of its horses. Deanna's instincts, honed by Owen's patient teaching and her own growing experience, proved excellent. She could look at a foal and predict its future value, could match mare and stallion for optimal offspring, could train even the most difficult horses with a patience she had learned from her husband. In the spring of 1885, Deanna realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully, wondering if he would be happy or overwhelmed. His reaction left no doubt. He swept her into his arms, spun her around despite her laughing protests, and kissed her with such joy that Deanna felt it all the way to her toes. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A baby, Deanna. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Owen said. "Terrified, amazed, grateful, overjoyed, all of it at once." The pregnancy was not easy. Deanna suffered from terrible nausea in the early months and had to cut back on the physical work she loved. Owen hovered anxiously, trying to get her to rest more, until Deanna finally snapped at him that she was pregnant, not dying, and he needed to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "I am sorry," Owen said, chastened. "I just worry. I love you so much, and the thought of anything happening to you terrifies me." Deanna softened immediately, reached up to cup his face. "I know, but I need you to trust that I know my own body, that I will tell you if something is wrong. I need to feel useful, Owen, not like an invalid." They found a balance, with Owen taking over the heaviest work while Deanna handled the administrative tasks and the lighter training. As her belly grew, Deanna found herself talking to the baby, telling stories about the ranch and the horses, about Thomas, who had started it all, and Owen, who had saved it, about the love that had brought this new life into being. In December of 1885, during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the world look like it had been dipped in sugar, Deanna went into labor. Owen sent for the midwife, and then held Deanna's hand through the long hours of pain and fear and determination. "You can do this," he kept saying, his voice steady even though his face was pale. "You are the strongest person I know, Deanna. You can do anything." Deanna wanted to argue that she did not feel strong, that the pain was overwhelming, but she saved her breath for the work at hand. Hours later, as dawn was breaking over the Oklahoma plains, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Owen cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect human he had helped create. "He is beautiful," Owen whispered. "Deanna, he is so beautiful." Deanna, exhausted but elated, reached for her son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and blue eyes that would probably change, and when she held him, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. This was her son, hers and Owen's, a symbol of their love and their future. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Deanna had been thinking about this for months. "I want to name him Thomas," she said quietly. "Thomas Bradford. After the man who started this ranch and the man who saved it, a way of honoring both the past and the future." Owen's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel like you have to." "I am sure," Deanna said firmly. Thomas Langford gave me everything, including the strength to survive losing him. And you, Owen, you gave me a reason to live again. This baby is the product of both those gifts. Thomas Bradford feels right. Owen leaned down and kissed her, gentle and reverent. Thomas Bradford, he said, trying out the name. Our son, our family. Deanna looked at her husband and her baby, at the life she had built from the ashes of grief, and felt gratitude so profound it made her chest ache. She had thought her story ended when Thomas died, that she would spend the rest of her life trapped in that moment of loss. But Owen had shown her that grief did not have to be the end, that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that patience and kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. Baby Thomas grew into a healthy, happy child, adored by both his parents and everyone who met him. Deanna would bring him out to the barn in a sling, showing him the horses even when he was too young to understand. Owen would hold him while Deanna worked, singing soft songs in that Louisiana drawl that made Diana's heart melt. When Thomas was 6 months old, Diana took him up the hill to the cemetery. She sat by the gravestone, the baby in her arms, and introduced him to the man he was named after. "This is your namesake," she told the baby, even though he could not understand. "Thomas Langford was a good man who loved me and this ranch with everything he had. You carry his name because he deserves to be remembered, because his dreams live on in you." She placed her free hand on the gravestone, feeling the sun-warmed granite. "Thank you, Thomas," she said softly. "Thank you for loving me, for teaching me what love should look like, for building something that could survive even your loss. I will make sure our son knows who you were, what you meant to me. You are not forgotten." The baby grabbed at her hair with chubby fists, and Deanna laughed, kissed his head, and carried him back down the hill to where Owen was waiting. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Baby Thomas became a toddler, then a young boy, curious and energetic and fascinated by the horses. Deanna and Owen had 2 more children, a daughter they named Sarah in 1888 and another son named James in 1891. The house that had once felt empty was now bursting with life and laughter, and the chaos that came with raising children on a working ranch. Diana taught all 3 children to ride almost before they could walk, passing on the skills Thomas had taught her and Owen had refined. Owen taught them patience and respect for the animals, the same lessons he had once taught Deanna. Together, they built a family that was strong and loving, rooted in the past but reaching toward the future. The ranch continued to thrive. Deanna's breeding program, built on Thomas's foundation and Owen's expertise, became legendary. Buyers came from as far away as California and New York to purchase horses from the Langford Ranch, and Diana took fierce pride in every sale, knowing that Thomas's dream had exceeded even his own ambitions. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1894, Owen surprised Diana with a trip to New Orleans, arranging for neighbors to watch the children and the ranch for a week. It was the first time Deanna had left Oklahoma since arriving with Thomas 12 years earlier, and the experience was both thrilling and strange. Owen showed her the city where he had grown up, the streets he had walked as a boy, the places that had shaped him. They ate food Deanna had never tasted, listened to music that made her heart race, danced in their hotel room with the windows open to the humid night air. "Thank you," Deanna said one evening as they sat on their hotel balcony, watching the sun set over the Mississippi River. "For this trip, for our life, for everything you have given me." "I should be thanking you," Owen said, pulling her close. "You gave me a purpose when I was drifting. You let me love you when you had every reason to close your heart. You built a family with me, a life that is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I almost missed it," Deanna said quietly. I almost let grief keep me from this. If you had pushed, if you had tried to rush me, I would have closed off completely. But you gave me space and time, and that is what let me fall in love with you. I would do it all again, Owen said. Every day of patience, every moment of uncertainty, every second of hoping you might someday look at me the way you look at me now. It was all worth it, Deanna. You are worth everything. They made love that night with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of long partnership, and Deanna felt grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them to this moment. When they returned to Oklahoma, their children ran to greet them, and Diana scooped them all into her arms, breathing in the scent of horses and hay that clung to their clothes. This was her life now, full and rich and nothing like she had imagined when she stood by Thomas's grave and swore she would never love again. The turn of the century brought changes to Tulsa and to the ranch. The Wild West was slowly becoming less wild, with law and order establishing itself more firmly, with modern conveniences beginning to creep into even rural Oklahoma. But the Bradford Ranch, as it was now known, remained committed to the traditions that had made it successful. Young Thomas, now 14, showed a real aptitude for the breeding program. He had his mother's instincts and his father's patience, and he spent hours poring over the records that 3 generations had now contributed to. Deanna watched him with pride and a touch of sadness, remembering the man he was named after, wishing Thomas Langford could see what his legacy had become. Sarah, at 11, was fearless with the horses, able to ride anything and determined to prove she was as capable as her brothers. James, at 8, was quieter, more thoughtful, but he had a gift for gentling even the most difficult horses. Diana was 40 years old now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined from years of sun and wind and laughter. Owen was 42, still strong and vital, still looking at her with the same love he had shown from the beginning. They had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, had built something that would outlast them both, had created a family that honored the past while embracing the future. One evening in the spring of 1899, Deanna climbed the hill to the cemetery as she still did regularly, though now it was more from habit than need. Thomas's gravestone was weathered now, the letters worn but still legible. She sat on the bench Owen had built years ago, looking out over the ranch that spread below. "Your son is 14 now," she told the gravestone. "He is smart and kind and so much like you it makes my heart ache sometimes. Sarah is wild and brave, everything I wanted to be at her age. James is gentle and thoughtful, a peacemaker even when his siblings are fighting. They are good children, Thomas. You would have loved them." She paused, listening to the wind. "Owen and I have been married 14 years now. He is a good husband, a wonderful father, the best partner I could have asked for. He honors your memory by caring for what you built, by teaching our children about you, by never trying to erase you from our lives. I still love you, Thomas. I always will. But I love him too, and I have finally made peace with the fact that my heart is big enough for both." Deanna sat there as the sun set, thinking about the journey that had brought her from crushing grief to profound joy, from a widow who thought she would never smile again to a wife and mother surrounded by love. Owen had not pushed her toward this life. He had simply offered her his hand and waited for her to decide she was ready to take it. That patience, that respect for her grief and her timeline, had been the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. It had allowed her to heal in her own way at her own pace, until she was ready to love again. And because he had not pushed, because he had given her space, she had fallen in love with him completely and without reservation. As Deanna walked back down the hill in the gathering darkness, she could see the lights of the ranch house, warm and welcoming. Through the window, She could see Owen helping James with his schoolwork while Sarah and Thomas argued good-naturedly about something. This was her family, her life, her joy. She walked into the house, and Owen looked up with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything is perfect," Deanna said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. Young Thomas took over more of the breeding program as he got older, showing an instinct for bloodlines that rivaled even Deanna's. Sarah married a neighboring rancher in 1907, a good man who adored her and respected her strength. James went to college in 1910, studying veterinary medicine, with plans to return to the ranch and bring modern medical care to their horses. Deanna and Owen grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They still worked side by side on the ranch, though they hired more help now to manage the physical labor. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still visited Thomas's grave together, Deanna sharing stories about the ranch's success, and Owen standing quietly beside her, honoring the man who had made it all possible. In 1915, 32 years after Thomas Langford's death, Deanna and Owen celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 3 days, filled with music and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from a life well lived. On the night of their actual anniversary, Deanna and Owen walked up the hill to the cemetery together. They stood by Thomas's grave, and Deanna placed fresh flowers on the stone. "Thank you for sharing her with me," Owen said, speaking directly to the gravestone for the first time in all the years they had been married. "Thank you for loving her so well that she knew what real love looked like. Thank you for building something worth preserving. You made her the woman I fell in love with, and I owe you everything for that." Diana felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of gratitude and peace, not grief. She leaned into Owen's solid warmth, feeling his arm around her waist, and looked at the life they had built together. "I swore I would never love again," she said softly, "but you were patient, you did not push, and that is why I did fall in love with you. That is why we have this life, this family, this joy." They stood there as the stars came out, 3 people bound together by love. A woman who had learned that the heart could heal, a man who had proven that patience was its own form of devotion, and the memory of the man who had started it all. As they walked back down the hill, Deanna looked at the ranch spread out before them, the barns and pastures and fences, the house with lights glowing in every window. She thought about the scared, grieving widow she had been, kneeling by a fresh grave and making a vow she thought she would keep forever. She thought about the cowboy who had stayed when everyone else left, who had given her space and time and love without conditions. "I am glad I broke my vow," Deanna said, squeezing Owen's hand. "I am glad you took your time before you did," Owen replied. "Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to." They walked into the house together, into the warmth and noise of their family, into the life they had built one patient day at a time. Deanna looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the ranch that bore testimony to 3 generations of love and work, and felt a contentment so deep, it seemed to emanate from her very bones. This was what healing looked like. This was what love looked like when it was given time and space to grow at its own pace. This was what happened when grief was honored instead of rushed, when patience was valued more than passion, when a man understood that the greatest gift he could give was simply to stay without demanding anything in return. Owen Bradford, who had been Deanna Langford, who had sworn on her husband's grave that she would never love again, had learned that the heart was more resilient than she had ever imagined. She had learned that love was not a betrayal of the past, but an honoring of it, that moving forward did not mean leaving behind, that joy and sorrow could coexist in the same soul. And she had learned it all because a cowboy named Owen Bradford had been patient enough to let her discover it for herself. As the evening wore on, and the family gathering continued around her, Diana caught Owen's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that gentle smile that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat, and she smiled back, pouring 30 years of love and gratitude into that single expression. The Wild West was fading into history, but the values that had built the Bradford Ranch remained constant. Hard work, integrity, respect for the past, and hope for the future. Diana and Owen had created something that would outlast them both, a legacy that honored Thomas Langford's dreams while building new ones. In the years that followed, Diana would often think about the path that had brought her from widowhood to this full, rich life. She never regretted the vow she had made at Thomas's grave, because it had been necessary at the time, a way to honor her grief and her love. But she also never regretted breaking it, because doing so had opened her heart to a love that was different from but no less profound than what she had shared with Thomas. Owen continued to be the man he had always been, patient, kind, respectful, devoted. He treated Diana with the same gentle courtesy he had shown from the beginning, never taking her love for granted, always grateful for the gift she had given him by choosing to open her heart again. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love remaining constant. When Diana was 60 and Owen was 62, they sat on the porch one evening and watched their grandson, named Thomas after his father and his father's namesake, working with a young horse in the training pen. "You ever regret it?" Diana asked Owen. "Waiting so long for me?" "You could have had any number of women who were not broken and grieving." Owen turned to look at her, and his blue eyes were still as clear and honest as they had been 36 years earlier when he first told her he loved her. "I never wanted any number of women," he said. "I only ever wanted you, and you were not broken, Diana. You were healing. There is a difference." "You saw me at my worst," Diana said. "When I could barely get out of bed, when I could not stop crying, when I was so consumed by grief I could not see any future at all." "I saw you at your most honest," Owen corrected gently. "Grief is not weakness. Love is not weakness. You loved Thomas deeply, and when you lost him, you felt that loss just as deeply. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is evidence of a heart capable of extraordinary love. And you were willing to wait for that heart to heal." "I would have waited forever," Owen said simply. "You were worth any amount of time." Diana leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint the Oklahoma sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I love you, Owen Bradford. I loved you when I thought I could never love again, and I love you now with everything I have." "I love you too," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "Always have, always will." They sat there in comfortable silence, two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had built a life together on a foundation of patience and respect and abiding love. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to their partnership and their perseverance. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren moved about, the sound of laughter and conversation drifting through the open windows. This was the legacy Diana and Owen would leave behind. Not just a successful ranch, but a family that understood the value of patience, the power of love, and the resilience of the human heart. As darkness fell, and the stars emerged one by one in the vast Oklahoma sky, Diana thought about the scared young widow she had been, making a vow she thought she would keep forever. She thought about the cowboy who had respected that vow while quietly showing her that life could still hold joy and purpose. She thought about the years of healing and growth, of learning to love again without erasing the past. "Thank you," she whispered to Owen, "for everything. For staying, for waiting, for loving me even when I could not love you back. For understanding that I needed time, and for giving me that time without resentment or pressure. You saved my life, Owen. You gave me a reason to keep living when I thought I had none." "You saved mine too," Owen replied. "I was drifting before I met you, just moving from place to place without any real purpose. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to put down roots. We saved each other, Deanna." They walked into the house together, Owen's arm around Deanna's waist, her head resting against his shoulder. They had traveled a long road together, from grief to hope, from loss to love, from solitude to family. And it had all been possible because a cowboy had understood that sometimes the greatest act of love was simply to wait. Deanna Bradford lived to the age of 72, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy she and Owen and Thomas had built together. Owen outlived her by 2 years, spending his final time on Earth tending the ranch they had built and visiting the cemetery where both his wife and the man who had made her, who she was, were buried side by side. The Bradford Ranch continued to thrive for generations, a monument to the power of patience and the resilience of love. And those who knew the story of how it was built always remembered the lesson at its heart. That healing cannot be rushed. That love given time and space to grow becomes stronger than anything forced or hurried. And that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply the freedom to heal at their own pace. Deanna had sworn on her husband's grave that she would never love again. But Owen had not pushed, had not demanded, had not tried to rush her past her grief. He had simply stayed, patient and kind and steady, until the day she was ready to open her heart again. And because he had given her that gift of time, she had fallen in love with him completely, building a life that honored both the past she could not change and the future they created together. In the end, that patience made all the difference. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. It was the reason a grieving widow became a loving wife, the reason a dying ranch became a thriving legacy, the reason 3 people, 2 living and 1 gone, could exist together in harmony across the years. The Wild West faded into history, but the love story of Deanna and Owen Bradford lived on, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone you love is to give them the gift of time.